It may be difficult to spot false connections, just as it is difficult to tell a mirage from an oasis in the wide desert of human contact. The secret is to surround yourself solely with positive individuals who help you reach your full potential. Finding the people who really care about us is an art that demands both intuition and a sharp eye in a world full of encounters and disconnections where masks of kindness and self-interest are expertly worn. If you are new to my channel, please assist me by like and subscribing to the videos. In this manner, I may make additional stuff of the same kind in the future. Like an expert gardener who understands to discern between plants that nourish and those that suck nutrients from the soil, sometimes we end up trusting too much in the compassion and good intention of others, while in reality we are just being exploited. It is essential that we acquire the ability to discern genuine allies in our life, as well as emotional parasites. First, a decline in comments. Individuals who often use people as stepping stones for their own gain are skilled at using small talk as an erosion weapon. The targets of these remarks lose confidence, self-worth, and self-esteem. These remarks, which may pass for lighthearted conversation or comedy, are really cutting jabs meant to depress rather than encourage. They may minimize your accomplishments, make fun of your goals, or act indifferently and insensitively toward your difficulties. The way this conduct undervalues and upsets the equilibrium in a relationship makes it akin to subtle psychological warfare. It's a deliberate maneuver to keep you feeling low on confidence and self-worth, which will make you easier to manipulate and control. They see your low self-esteem as a way to get respect and solidify their dominance in the relationship. Furthermore, these demeaning remarks often mirror the inadequacies and fears of the speaker. They attempt to conceal their own frailties and present an image of superiority by making fun of other people. This conduct is a blatant sign that they are unable to build connections that are mutually beneficial, healthy, and helpful. It's critical to identify and comprehend this behavioral tendency. It enables you to look beyond the flimsy attractiveness that these individuals often try to exhibit and comprehend the poisonous dynamics at the heart of the connection. It's a warning to deal with the behavior head-on, establish firm limits, or get out of such a poisonous situation. Second, unfulfilled expectations. Making and breaking promises may be likened to a play in which the words are the characters and the deftly written script is the action. These folks are masters of verbal persuasion. They construct striking images of dedication and support, but often their words don't translate into actual action. With the flourish of a painter, they set expectations, but when it comes time to bring these imagined visions to life, they falter, making their hollow promises apparent. When their assistance is most required, when their promise should be kept, a pattern in this kind of connection appears. These individuals often go, leaving a gap brimming with sadness and sorrow. Not only is their lack of presence at difficult times a betrayal of confidence, but it also reveals their actual intentions. Their assurances are deceptive tactics used to get worth, confidence, or assistance without expecting anything in return. The inability to fulfill commitments thereafter turns into a kind of litmus test that separates those who see relationships as two-way streets built on respect and support from others who view them as nothing more than vehicles for their own selfish ends. A sad but important lesson is sometimes learned by those left behind. Not all promises are made with honesty and integrity. As a result, breaking promises is a crucial habit to watch out for, comprehend, and spot in those who could try to take advantage of others. Third, one-sided gain. This may show itself in a relationship in a number of ways, including practical, emotional, and financial. In terms of finances, the user could borrow funds or resources with non-fulfilled promises of return or reciprocity. When it comes to emotional support, affirmation, and attention, they may rely largely on one another and provide little to nothing in return. In situations when the roles are virtually reversed, they may persistently ask for time, favors, or assistance, yet seem noticeably absent or preoccupied when their counterpart needs support. A parasitic relationship in which one organism benefits at the cost of the other is similar to unilateral benefit. Similar to a parasite, the user receives support, emotional, material, or financial, without making a comparable or sufficient contribution to the welfare of their host. This lack of reciprocity over time may drain the giver's emotional, material, or temporal resources, leaving them exhausted and disappointed. Unilateral advantage often stems from deep-seated selfishness and a lack of empathy. The user has a transactional perspective on relationships, assessing exchanges more on what they can get than on what they can provide. This method of approaching relationships is essentially incorrect because it fails to recognize the intrinsic worth of support, respect, and reciprocity. It takes a keen eye to see this pattern. It entails realizing the relationship's enduring lack of reciprocity and your sense of perpetual undervaluation. You have to be honest about whether the encounters are making you feel important and appreciated, or like a tool and undervalued. Fourth, show no consideration for your needs or emotions. Taking care of a garden when just one flower is let to blossom is analogous to this pattern of conduct, in which one's emotional landscape is routinely disregarded or undervalued. In these kinds of encounters, the user's interests and wants are given priority while yours are ignored or minimized. Your mental well-being is harmed by their words and deeds, which make you feel invisible and undervalued in the relationship. This disdain may take many different forms. It might be apparent in the way they consistently ignore your emotional needs by refusing to help or sympathize when you're in need or vulnerable. It may also be seen in their disregard for your decisions and viewpoints, as their prevailing narrative muffles your voice. They could minimize the problems that really impact you, or worse, they might minimize your accomplishments. This isn't just inconsiderate conduct, it's deliberate disregard, a tactic to hold on to power in the relationship. The user lowers your self-esteem by dismissing your wants and emotions, which increases your vulnerability to their influence and control. It is a kind of deceptively subtle emotional manipulation, yet it has a big effect, because it impacts the fundamental need for emotional well-being, to be heard, understood, and valued. This dynamic is particularly damaging. Even in relationships that seem to be dynamic, it may cause a decline in self-esteem and a feeling of loneliness when these requirements are consistently disregarded. Understanding the warning signals of emotional neglect is crucial for navigating these seas. This awareness turns into a lighthouse that directs you away from relationships that jeopardize your emotional health and toward those where mutual respect, reciprocity, and caring are the cornerstones. Fifth, manipulation of emotions. Usually, it begins subtly, with the manipulator coming off as kind and attentive. But soon, this facade turns into a tool for instilling in their victim emotions of shame, inadequacy, or worry. They become good at playing on your emotions. When it suits them, they will compliment you and encourage you. But when the time comes, they will brutally criticize or undermine you to instill uncertainty and dependence. Think about the comparison between a fragile plant and a gardener. A thoughtful gardener nourishes with just the correct quantity of sunshine and water. The emotional manipulator, on the other hand, varies between giving the plant too much water and allowing it to wither due to drought. Much like a careless gardener, they create an atmosphere where the victim gets emotionally dependent on the manipulator and is always looking for their approval to reclaim that first feeling of warmth by using emotional extremes to destabilize. The basic foundation of emotional health is often the focus of this manipulation. To maintain your constant skepticism, they could minimize your successes or exaggerate your setbacks. They may fabricate circumstances to make you feel bad for doing everyday acts, assigning responsibility to make sure you constantly say you're sorry. The power dynamic in partnerships that include emotional manipulation is inherently imbalanced. By controlling when to show love and when to withhold it, the manipulator keeps their victim in a condition of emotional reliance. In this dynamic, the other person's emotional well-being is sacrificed in order to satisfy the manipulator's demands, rather than fostering mutual development or support. A keen understanding of these interactions is necessary in order to recognize emotional manipulation. It entails identifying interactional patterns in which emotions are routinely controlled and necessitates reflection to comprehend the impact of these patterns on one's sense of self and emotional health. Sixth, insufficient real support. Imagine a tree in a huge forest that is perfectly supported by the nearby flora and trees, getting food, shade, and the companionship of a healthy ecology. Now picture a tree by itself in a desolate area with no other plants to provide shade or support. This is like being in a relationship with someone who doesn't really care about you. You find yourself all by yourself, without assistance, your branches reaching out for company that never materializes. These kinds of interactions result in indifference or seeming acts of support towards your objectives, initiatives, and difficulties. This individual may not speak out against your intentions, wish you luck, or even show you support in words, but their deeds, or lack thereof, speak louder when it comes to real help, insightful counsel, or simply just listening when things become hard. Their egotistical attitude is the cause of this lack of sincere support. Your accomplishments or shortcomings, difficulties or passions, only matter to them to the extent that they influence them or their goals. They have a transactional perspective on relationships, calculating emotional engagement in terms of possible personal gains. An imbalance results from this mentality when one side continuously provides resources, attention, or effort while the other gets them. Recognizing these tendencies in a relationship is essential to preserving mental health and building relationships built on reciprocity and respect. It makes it possible for you to go beyond dishonest people and establish wholesome connections. In summary, identifying fake relationships is a critical ability in the intricate web of human interactions. It calls for a blend of self-awareness, intuition, and the capacity to recognize minute behavioral patterns. You may negotiate the relationship landscape more skillfully if you recognize the warning indications of decreasing remarks, broken promises, unilateral benefit, emotional neglect, and manipulation. This knowledge gives you the ability to build genuine, gratifying, and helpful relationships that improve your general well-being. As you go out on this path of understanding human behavior, keep in mind that sincere connections are based on mutual respect, trust, and a dedication to development and well-being. 7. Never-ending rivalry. Envision a chess match in which every move is strategically planned to both strengthen one's own position and weaken the opponent's position. Comparably, someone who is solely interested in using you will often approach your relationship like a game of strategy. They use all of your accomplishments, choices, and even setbacks as a chance to show how great they are. Whether it's by overshadowing your career triumphs, outperforming your personal accomplishments, or quietly undercutting your choices, the need to maintain an advantage in this self-imposed competition drives their behavior. This ongoing rivalry takes many different forms. They might attempt to dominate you in meetings or claim credit for your ideas if you're in a professional environment. In interpersonal interactions, they could downplay your accomplishments or experiences by often drawing comparisons to their own to make them seem more important. There's an underlying tension, even in lighthearted discussions, to demonstrate one's superiority, intelligence, or accomplishment. This conduct stems from a deep-seated sense of insecurity and a skewed sense of one's own value, which is determined more by one's superiority over others than by one's own abilities. This viewpoint reduces all interactions to a zero-sum game in which you have to lose in order for them to win. It's a mindset in which the need to succeed and stand out eclipses the desire for mutual improvement. It may be emotionally draining to interact with someone who displays this fierce rivalry all the time. It fosters an atmosphere of constant tension when competitiveness takes the place of sincere cooperation or support. Your triumphs are not greeted with joy, but rather as threats to their hegemony. And your setbacks are not seen with compassion, but rather as chances for them to get the upper hand. Recognizing and comprehending this pattern is essential. Establishing limits and attempting to realign the relationship towards a more cooperative and well-being dynamic might be beneficial. It entails realizing that mutual respect and support, rather than a never-ending competition for dominance, are the cornerstones of every healthy partnership. 8th, non-attendance at crucial times. This pattern of activity is comparable to a tree that only offers shade during mild weather and vanishes when storm clouds roll in. They are there, sharing the light, and maybe enjoying the advantages of their connection when things are going well. But when things change, when obstacles appear and help is required, their presence wanes, and you are left to weather the storm on your own. These individuals see relationships as a convenience, a means to a goal, and gauge the value of their connection in terms of their own gain. Their support is flimsy. They only give in when it suits their interests or makes sense for them. Their absence is noticeable at difficult times, such as personal crises, career setbacks, or emotional upheaval. Their actual priorities and lack of commitment to the relationship become evident at these times when real support and empathy are required. This action might have a significant effect on the individual who is disappointed. It erodes the dependability and trust that were seen as essential to the partnership, creating a feeling of betrayal and disappointment. Concerns over the nature of the relationship surface, which often prompts a reassessment of the person's importance and function in one's life. Recognizing the nature of the connection and the other person's genuine intentions requires an understanding of this pattern. It necessitates admitting that the foundation of every lasting partnership is unwavering support through good times and bad. When you realize someone is not there for you when you need them most, it's a crucial litmus test for separating those who are in the relationship for personal gain from those who are really interested in your welfare. 9. Insufficient reciprocity. Picture a seesaw with one side light and without any comparable contributions, and the other side heavy with the weight of labor, sacrifices, and commitments. This picture depicts a relationship in which there is no reciprocity. When you have these kinds of relationships, you constantly give time, effort, and feelings, trying to build and maintain the relationship. On the other hand, the other person's contributions are little, often symbolic or non-existent. This difference in effort might take many different forms. It is possible that you are the one who usually starts up the conversation and makes arrangements while others give you ambiguous or indifferent answers. It's possible that your ongoing support and understanding won't get the same amount of consideration or help when you need it. You can be candid and open, even while discussing personal experiences and abilities, but they can be reticent or uninterested. This lack of reciprocity stems from a relational philosophy that is mostly self-centered. The connection is a convenience and a resource to be exploited as required, without the goal of a meaningful exchange for the person who merely wants to take advantage of you. They disregard the needs and sentiments of others in favor of their own determined and conditioned engagement. This strategy contradicts the fundamental principles of wholesome relationships, which are built on shared experiences, equitable giving and receiving, and a balanced emotional labor commitment. Analyzing the dynamics of the relationship consciously is necessary to identify the absence of reciprocity. It entails questioning if efforts to preserve and strengthen the relationship are equally shared or mercilessly taken on by you. It necessitates an open evaluation of how equal or unequal, fulfilling or taxing the partnership seems. 10th, betrayal. In a relationship, betrayal is akin to a fissure in the building's foundation. Even while it could begin slowly and go undetected, over time it might damage the building as a whole and finally cause it to collapse. From lies and deception to more profound betrayals, there are many ways that betrayal may appear. A lack of honesty and openness in communication is an indication of betrayal. It's a warning sign if you find out that the other individual is habitually lying or hiding facts. Sincerity is the cornerstone of trust, and treachery erodes that basis. A lack of emotional allegiance is another way to betray someone. A lack of emotional commitment is evident when the other person gives up on you when things become hard, divulges your secrets, or belittles your efforts. Infidelity, whether it be physical or mental, is another way that betrayal may manifest. In a love relationship, betrayal may have serious, long-lasting effects. It takes intuition and awareness of warning indicators to recognize treachery. Never disregard behavioral irregularities or abrupt shifts in their treatment of you. Speaking honestly and openly with someone about betrayal is necessary. It's critical to handle the matter with empathy and a sincere desire to learn the truth if you find out that either you or the other person has been unfaithful. Setting limits and making choices that safeguard your mental health are as crucial, however. In summary, it is critical to recognize and comprehend these behavioral patterns in a partnership in order to preserve wholesome and significant bonds. Facing the matter head-on demands guts, honesty, and self-awareness. You are not alone if you see any of these trends in your relationship. Although addressing these concerns might be difficult, doing so is essential for your long-term health. Prioritizing your emotional well-being is always beneficial, whether you're establishing firm boundaries, getting expert advice, or having to make tough choices. Never forget that you deserve to be in relationships that help you develop, support, and are nurturing. 11. Distinctive accessibility. They're not accessible, but you are. In this case, selective availability suggests a unilateral connection, similar to a phone line where just one person is ever accessible. You are always there to listen, provide support, or provide assistance while in this dynamic. They have easy access to your resources and emotional schedule. The other person, on the other hand, is as uncommon as a comet in the night sky, occasional, erratic, and always on their terms. There is more to this disparity in availability than just a hectic schedule or competing objectives. It is a conscious decision made by the one making use of the connection, a calculated tactic. They benefit from being unavailable since it keeps them at a comfortable distance and gives them authority. They establish a dynamic where you are left wanting more and often feeling appreciative of whatever time or attention they manage to provide by restricting their availability. Your attempts to interact or connect in these relationships are often met with justifications, holdups, or plain disregard. You can get ignored texts, missed calls, and unmet demands. When they do interact, it's usually to further their agendas or meet their demands, which makes the relationship one-sided and your position less about being a respected partner and more about convenience. This tendency may have a substantial emotional cost. Feelings of inadequacy are cultivated when you start to doubt your own value and the other person's perception of your worth. You start to feel resentful and frustrated because you know that your availability and efforts are not valued. It is critical to identify the pattern of selective availability. It entails stepping back and assessing the relationship's effort to availability ratio impartially. It necessitates realizing that mutual respect, effort, and presence are the cornerstones of good partnerships. Number 12. Creating a sense of guilt. Consider a situation in which shame acts as if it were a puppeteer, dragging the good conscience and leading it in a direction they would not have chosen on their own. The person abusing you is adept at pulling these threads, taking advantage of your feeling of accountability, compassion, or justice. They may present their demands in a manner that suggests you are being callous or self-centered if you refuse them. Alternatively, they could bring to mind occurrences or favors from the past, suggesting an unacknowledged obligation that you now have to pay back. This subtle and sneaky method of instilling guilt is often used. It begins with little concessions or favors and builds up to larger requests over time. You get caught in a vicious cycle of guilt and acquiescence as your boundaries are compromised and your capacity to say no is diminished. The other person's wants and demands are prioritized, while yours are either entirely ignored or put to the side. This strategy works well because it takes advantage of a basic human tendency, which is the need to be seen as kind, helpful, and sympathetic. The user twists these qualities into levers of control by instilling guilt in you. You find yourself doing out of a forced sense of responsibility, rather than out of true desire or respect for the other person, and you often feel angry or exhausted. It's critical to recognize when someone is manipulating you with guilt in order to preserve your emotional stability and personal boundaries. It entails recognizing the emotional currents in your relationships and telling the difference between sincere pleas for assistance and ill-gotten gains. It also takes guts to challenge the request's reasons and stand up for your right to refuse without feeling bad. Recognizing and dealing with this deceptive strategy is crucial to building strong bonds based on genuine concern, respect for one another, and free will as opposed to guilt and duty. 13. Absence of individual interest. Consider a discussion as a thoroughfare where ideas, memories, and emotions are constantly moving in both directions. This street is alive with the sharing of shared interests and concern in a good partnership. But when you're dealing with someone who only wants to use you, this roadway turns into a one-way path. While efforts to direct the topic toward your life sometimes result in diversions or dead ends, their tales and experiences are what propel the conversation. This disinterest on a personal level takes many forms. Talking to such people often seems like talking about themselves in a monologue. They readily share the specifics of their struggles, victories, and day-to-day lives, hoping to elicit sympathy and attention from you. But their fascination fades when they become the center of attention. They could make hurried movements in response, quickly shift the topic, or exhibit overt signs of frustration or indifference. Regardless matter how big or little, your issues and experiences hardly seem to register on their care radar. This conduct goes beyond a simple lack of conversational or social graces. It is a purposeful statement of their goals and objectives. They create a dynamic where their wants, ideas, and lives take priority by taking over the discussion and ignoring your tales. It's a subdued kind of egocentrism in which you are confined to a supporting position in the relationship and are only seen as an observer or sounding board for their thoughts. Such contacts may have a very depressing effect. When the basic human desire for acceptance and understanding is not met, it may result in emotions of worthlessness and annoyance. This disparity has the potential to weaken the foundations of the partnership over time, making you feel less like an equal partner and more like an ornament in their life. It's critical to acknowledge this lack of personal involvement. It entails understanding the nature of your exchanges and the emotional toll that these one-sided talks have on you. Assessing whether the connection is mutually beneficial or exhausting opens the door to finding more rewarding and reciprocal partnerships in which both of your experiences and stories are recognized and cherished equally. Number 14. Conversations with individuals. Consider a situation in which discussions are analogous to a street with a constant flow of ideas, memories, and feelings in both directions. This street is alive with the sharing of shared interests and concern in a good partnership. But when you're dealing with someone who only wants to use you, this roadway turns into a one-way path. While efforts to direct the topic toward your life sometimes result in diversions or dead ends, their tales and experiences are what propel the conversation. This disinterest on a personal level takes many forms. Talking to such people often seems like talking about themselves in a monologue. They readily share the specifics of their struggles, victories, and day-to-day lives, hoping to elicit sympathy and attention from you. But their fascination fades when they become the center of attention. They could make hurried movements in response, quickly shift the topic, or exhibit overt signs of frustration or indifference. Regardless matter how big or little, your issues and experiences hardly seem to register on their care radar. This conduct goes beyond a simple lack of conversational or social graces. It is a purposeful statement of their goals and objectives. They create a dynamic where their wants, ideas, and lives take priority by taking over the discussion and ignoring your tales. It's a subdued kind of egocentrism in which you are confined to a supporting position in the relationship and are only seen as an observer or sounding board for their thoughts. Such contacts may have a very depressing effect. When the basic human desire for acceptance and understanding is not met, it may result in emotions of worthlessness and annoyance. This disparity has the potential to weaken the foundations of the partnership over time, making you feel less like an equal partner and more like an ornament in their life. It's critical to acknowledge this lack of personal involvement. They could laugh together, communicate often, and even take part in what seem to be private discussions. This seeming intimacy, nevertheless, never becomes really meaningful. This lack of sincere dedication takes many forms. You could see that while they are fast to reap the rewards of the partnership, they are also ready to back off when exertion or sacrifice are needed from them. Their assistance is often unsteady or non-existent when needed. While they may be around for happy occasions and festivities, they would be conspicuously absent during difficult or vulnerable times. Moreover, the essential components of trust and dependability that support real relationships are often absent from this surface-level intimacy. Promises are seldom honored, and plans might be formed just to be carelessly canceled. Convenience and self-interest typically drive their parameters of engagement in the partnership, keeping up a network of connections that can be tapped into whenever required without having to put in the emotional work that real relationships need is often the driving force behind this behavior. It's a tactic to keep individuals close enough to be helpful without pressing for a commitment on both sides. It may be seen as a means of achieving emotional security, reaping the rewards of intimacy without running the danger of true connection or accountability. Acknowledging surface-level intimacy is essential to comprehending the dynamics at work in a relationship. It entails examining patterns of contact and asking if the apparent closeness is consistent with acts of sincere devotion and reciprocal vulnerability. It's about assessing if there is an equal emotional engagement in the relationship or whether it is skewed toward meeting their demands. It's the kind of relationship where there is a facade of closeness, but no real commitment or room for development on either side. Finding and fostering relationships based on genuineness, reciprocity, and genuine emotional depth is made possible by recognizing this pattern. Number 15. The persistent lack of etiquette. Persistent disrespect goes beyond brief errors in judgment or simple slip-ups during heated arguments. Rather, it becomes entangled in the very fabric of the relationship and takes on many forms, such as disparaging remarks, contemptuous demeanors, or even blatant disrespect for your emotions and personal space. This kind of conduct changes the metaphorical garden that is your relationship. It's like having little scratches or large sores on your dignity. When there is no regard, the once healthy environment becomes arid and unable to support life. Every effort at communication or connection becomes a treacherous route paved with disrespect and blatant disregard for others. Whether on purpose or accidentally, the one exhibiting this blatant lack of respect uses it as a technique to assert dominance and control over the other person in the relationship. It functions as a tool to minimize the other, maintaining an uneven dynamic in which respect and equality ought to be the norm. The fundamental tenets of the partnership are threatened by this persistent disrespect. Instead of being settled with compassion and understanding, disagreements become emotional battlegrounds with little regard for the victims. Relationship dynamics typical ebb and flow is upset, making the road back to normality and mutual respect difficult, if not impossible. It is critical to identify and understand this pattern of enduring contempt. It requires examining the larger behavioral context in addition to individual events. This concept highlights that respect isn't limited to large gestures. Rather, it flourishes in tiny acknowledgments, everyday encounters, and the tactful resolution of conflicts. In summary, a relationship where there is a consistent lack of respect is a serious red flag. It implies that the individual in issue sees you as a tool rather than as an equal partner. This shows how out of balance and toxic the relationship is when it comes to your emotions and dignity. It is essential for people who respect themselves and want partnerships based on equality and respect to recognize this quality.